Welcome back to Sanford Days. We are diving back into some more Magic content because we need to clarify some information that's imperative to know about Commander Kyles, as well as tackle some of the funniest comments in last week's video. I also forgot to mention the other archetype of negative player called the Crybaby Kyle, and I'm so sorry if your name is Kyle, it's just going to be dunked on throughout this video. If you haven't seen last week's video on the Kyles of Commander, then I'm going to link it in the description below. I highly recommend you watch that one before this one because I'm going to be referencing it a few times. But long story short, Commander Kyles are the Karens of Commander who want to pub stomp and never really are honest about the intentions of their deck. So why am I making a second video about this? And I think that's because it's very important that I didn't cover a concept called Kyle Math. Now, a lot of people had run to my comments in the previous video, not really following the context here, so I wanted to be very clear. If you like to play high power Commander and you are honest about that and decide to find other people who are willing to play against your high power deck, you're not a Kyle. There's an entire subsection of gamers who have been trying to optimize their gameplay since the day they were born, whether it be in physical media or in digital media. It doesn't really matter. If you want to optimize and make the most powerful deck you can, that's perfectly fine. If you're telling people that up front, then you are not a Kyle. I mean, at my local game store, we have an example of this exact individual. People will ask him how to make their decks better because they know how great his decks are, and he actually is willing to tone down and play precons to people if they're doing a casual table. This guy has a lot of really strong EDH decks, but it does not mean by any means that he's a Kyle. That guy just knows which type of experience he prefers, and that's all that everyone on the bracket system is really looking for, is finding other like-minded people to play the game the same way. It's because the game isn't about you, it's about everyone at the table, and everyone's trying to have an equal and fun experience. A very good example of having an equal and fun experience is going to any of your pre-release events. Like last night, I decided to go to the pre-release for Dragons of Tarkir, and guess what? It was an amazing experience. I would 100% do that again. Everyone's power level was fairly consistent. We all got to pick, which faction we were gonna be. I'm Jeskai, ride or die. We all started with a mutual understanding of what to expect for the night and what the goals were, and everybody besides maybe 3 or 4 people who dropped early was having a blast. Really, for all casual Magic, that is the goal. We all want to have fun and want to exclude someone, and I think that's why it's really important to hammer home the idea about not being a Commander Kyle. But really quickly, let me define a Commander Kyle in extreme detail so none of you think you are. There were a few people in the comments last time who really thought that they were being called out for playing the game they want, and I don't want that to be the case, so hold on. This type of Kyle is going to purposefully bring in overpowered decks while trying to claim their lesser bracket decks. The terms technically a 2 or it doesn't break any of the bracket rules are going to come up very often when they're explaining why their deck is a 2 after they've gotten done destroying everyone. They purposefully avoid tables of stronger opponents because they need to have an upper hand. They will get adamantly defensive if you try to change your deck to be one that is more powerful and on their level, and you can tell by the way they speak they believe that they are the main character and you are all just pawns inside of their game. There was a lot of people in the comments last video saying that I think I might be a Commander Kyle because my decks are powerful. That's not the case. If you like powerful decks, you're fine. Play with other powerful people or just let them know what you're playing. But on last week's video, we also received a comment which I am 99% sure is satire, but it pretty much sums up being a Commander Kyle indefinitely. It shows you exactly the mentality that everybody hates at their local tables.
Playing anything less than a 4 makes you a bad player. Imagine being so bad at chess and forcing good players to come down to your bad level.
I am purposely obfuscating this guy's name because honestly all the engagement that terrible comment got me, and the fact that it's most likely just rage bait kind of worked in my favor, but let's break it down. So part 1, you won't be a Kyle if you just play with other people who want to play 4s. That's perfectly fine. The second part of that is what I actually find to be funny, is because he uses a chess analogy, and chess is going to be a symmetrical game where you have all the same pieces as your opponent, and that's what everybody at a 2 pretty much wants, is the same power level as their opponent. When you bring a 4 to a 2 table, that means that you are bringing a chess set where your side is all queens and our side is mostly pawns. If this was satire, thank you very much for highlighting my point entirely, but if by some small chance it's not, I am so sorry and may God have mercy on your soul. And while his comment seems like it's satire because of the sheer absurdity, there were a lot of people justifying bringing pub stomping decks inside of the comments or talking about how the bracket system doesn't work. If you truly believe that you cannot make a deck that feels like a precon level power deck, maybe that's a you problem. There's a faction inside of the comments trying to state that the bracket system was only for new players because all of the older players, the more experienced players, are just going to naturally optimize their decks, and I have a problem with that statement because that's just the silliest goose mentality. You can play non-optimized decks. It is actually incredibly easy to do. If you pick up a card as an old school player and you say, would this be in a precon deck? If your answer is no, chances are it's not going to fit inside a 2. And I've worded this as nicely as I possibly can for so many iterations of the same statement, so I've just decided to come out and be blunt with it. If you decide to purposely obfuscate how your deck is going to play and the intended power of it, you're an asshole. It's funny to sugarcoat it and give these ideas of what a Commander Kyle is, but really at the end of the day, we're saying that it's unpleasant to play with someone like yourself. There is no point of the Commander Kyle idea that I'm saying that you shouldn't be able to play the game you want, but you need to play it with like-minded players and stop ruining things for other people, because not only are you hurting Magic by dissuading people from playing the biggest entry point for Magic right now, which is Commander, but you're taking the time of up to 3 other people, maybe more if you're playing in giant Commander games, and you're wasting it by being intentionally dishonest. Taking a break from the Commander Kyle rant, and before we go into what a crybaby Kyle is, I did want to address one more comment in the previous video, which was kind of hilarious and out of touch. Now, I'm not going to actually show this comment because I do believe it was in good intention, but someone argued against my idea for building a budget deck in order to try to keep your power level in a certain range by saying that the power of a card and the price of a card are not necessarily entangled. However, I can assure you that the more powerful cards will always gravitate towards a higher dollar amount. There are obviously exceptions to this rule, such as secret lair cards, which have an inflated price due to being collector's items. However, you'll even notice among secret lairs that powerful secret lair cards are worth significantly more than not powerful secret lairs cards. And more effective lands that cost a lot more money because they are purely just more effective lands can boost the price of a deck up very quickly. So if you're ever playing a deck and you get to architect it and it comes back as like $200+, you know it's not a budget deck and it's going to most likely be pretty powerful. That doesn't mean it's going to be game-breakingly powerful, but we know it's not a 1 and it's probably not a 2. And the unfortunate truth is, even if you manage to make a deck that is very budget and also very powerful, the second people get word that that is a powerful deck, those cards are going to start selling like hotcakes. And you can see this in real time because a lot of people will make their favorite budget deck list and post them online, and the second those things get posted and get any traction, the deck list actually gets quite a bit more expensive fairly quickly. I got to observe this in real time because I wanted to make a deck that had a budget of $80, and when I first made it, it was like 76 or so, and I've been watching it slowly increase. My Gale Spellslinger deck, it's slowly getting closer to that $80 mark. To switch modes, let's talk about something I mentioned earlier in the video, which is Kyle Math, and it's a very good risk analysis tool if you think you may be fighting against a Kyle that doesn't require you to be a dick and become one yourself. It's common knowledge that one Kyle amongst 3 honest players is going to equal a bad time. However, simply replacing one good player with another person you may believe to be a Kyle could really equal things out. Let me explain. Kyles are a massively confrontational and territorial species by their nature, and they will surely fight for dominance. If you've ever played against a Kyle, you know if you do anything flashy or mildly powerful, they'll do everything in their power to shut you down and ensure you don't get to play. Which is exactly why when there are 2 Kyles, they go at each other's throats. You may not have a powerful deck like theirs, but I'm sure after they end up weakening each other for turn on turn on turn, you will have the chance to go for the throat. The odds are only better in your favor in most circumstances if you get into a 3 Kyle, 1 fair and honest individual. Now, this is very rare of a situation because it means the Kyles were unable to detect each other by their pure odor, as well as their overuse of the word technically. But if you do manage to be the 1-2 at a table of Kyles all playing secret 3s and 4s, just sit back and relax. Focus on having a very slow board state. Make sure no one thinks that you even have the hint of the threat, and watch these 3 savages go at each other. It is a good time if you can sit there for a very long monologue or 2. Now, gaming the Kyles doesn't always work. If you ever give off a hint that you know that this Kyle math is in your favor, they will simply remove you from the game, and your deck, being an honest 2, will have no chance to stand up to them. So be sure as you play your cards, you go slowly and steadily, no sudden movements, no big loud gestures. Make sure you don't alert them, as their vision is based on movement. But they are better to be avoided than to be played against at all, as a Kyle is going to do everything they can to be the center of attention and the quote-unquote raid boss. Their egos are more inflated than their synthetic companion they got at the adult store. And that's all fun to joke around about, but really if someone's trying to be the 4 at the table of 2s, you should just simply let them know that you don't wish to play with them because they are trying to game the system They're trying to have an unfair advantage, and you just wouldn't find it fun. Stark reality checks may be the best way to get Kyles to repent. Okay, summing up before I move on to Crybaby Kyles, I want to say becoming a Commander Kyle is based on your intent. If you accidentally pub stomp, it happens. Sometimes decks just work really, really well by having the perfect hand. It does happen even in bracket 2 decks, and maybe you just won because of that. Or maybe you were just a little off at expressing the power level of the deck, or didn't understand, or maybe even your opponents didn't understand how to word their power level properly, so you over-engaged, but it's okay. Move on to the next game. It'll happen to everybody now and then, but if it continues to happen, perhaps there's something going on your side where you're gonna need to do a little bit better. And secondly, budget is not a guaranteed predictor of power level, but it is a very good tool. And Kyle, sit the hell down. I know you've got a budget Krenko deck that you're gonna say is technically a 2. Get out of here. We all know Krenko's bullshit. Without further ado, we have to move into Commander Kyle's arch nemesis, the Crybaby Kyle. And the crazy thing is, they're not actually mutually exclusive. You can be both a Commander Kyle and a Crybaby Kyle simultaneously. So what is the Crybaby Kyle variant that's wandering around our LGS? This type of Kyle is the type who found himself inside of a perfectly balanced table. Game has been going swimmingly. Everyone is getting to interact with the board and set up some of their pieces. There's a lot of politicking in the air. It's a wonderful experience for those who love magic. And suddenly, without warning, Kyle is about to have a nerd rage because somebody decided to counterspell one of his main win conditions. The fury of 1,000 suns, he begs you not to counter this very clear game-ending spell, and he gets incredibly irate and butthurt and ruins the mood for everyone else because he wants to win the game right now. Which usually shocks everybody because it's an obvious thing to do to counter someone else from trying to win the game right away. However, certain individuals, once again with that main character energy, think it's all about them. I've seen a few people flip on a dime like this because they weren't allowed to win the game. Because once again, it is a social thing. It is not all about you, Kyle. You can typically deduce a Commander Kyle within the first few turns of a game. A Crybaby Kyle sits in wait like a landmine, waiting to be tripped because you dared to have agency inside of your game. If you cannot take losing in a game, then perhaps Commander is not the format for you. The same reason we get upset with Commander Kyles for perfectly pub stomping a game into the ground, it's because it takes away the fun interactions and the politicking. But just because there's fun interactions and politicking, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be the one who wins the game. There can only be one winner, and even while we're not optimizing our decks and we're playing it like a bracket 2, it doesn't mean you get to win for freezies. There's no point in a Commander game when you should really be expecting someone else to pull their punches that way that you can win the game. Everyone's still trying to win in lower bracket games, but the issue is, the closer you get to bracket 1, the more it is about the adventure and how you get to the win versus the actual intention of winning itself. Yes, once again, there are outliers that don't actually intend to win the game. That is not common. Looping back to Crybaby Kyles, in some ways they're actually worse than Commander Kyles, because if you get pub stomped at a game, while it's a negative experience, it's usually over pretty quickly. But me personally, I get really frustrated when somebody ruins what was a fantastic game after like an hour of gameplay because their ego is just too large. Similarly, there was a lot of large ego people inside of my last group of comments. A lot of people sharing their experiences with Commander Kyles, and I wanted to read them aloud, but I wouldn't do that because that's their story, and I don't want to tell their story without permission. So you should go read those. They're really funny, honestly. Before wrapping this video up, I just want to state the entire reason why there is such a divide between the bracket system lovers and haters is because people are expecting different things. The bracket system cannot account for a lack of people policing themselves and keeping themselves inside of a reasonable order for a social experience of a game. The bracket system itself is going to be an impossible task. Even this beta version, where I think they're doing a pretty good job of being loose enough with the terms while being strict enough to help make some order, it's destined to fail. The only people who have any chance of making Commander fun and balanced and a good time for everyone at the table are the players themselves with a good discussion of what people are looking for in their game. Just to highlight the impossibility of the task of the bracket system's functionality, let's take a look at a standard deck of 52 playing cards. That is a 52 factorial breakdown, meaning that there are going to be more possibilities of that deck's arrangement than you would possibly ever be able to see constantly shuffling that deck until you died. And that is a deck of 52 cards that are always going to remain constant. There's always one King of Spades, there's always one Queen of Hearts, there's always always 1-2 of clubs, and that is how the deck is functioning. Now take that same concept, knowing that no matter how you shuffle the deck of cards, going through all 52 cards from top to bottom, that arrangement has probably never been seen before. Take that same line of reasoning and apply it to Commander, where all of the cards can be completely different, and each version of that deck being shuffled is a different power level in itself. If you were to take the time to make an extensive comprehensive list for, let's say, power points of each card that is in Magic the Gathering, it would still be wildly inconsistent. Having a true version of these rule sets for the bracket system are impossible. The only thing they can do is give us vague guidelines, because you know what your deck's going to play like, and you know what the higher and lower ends of it are, but we can't quantify that with numbers. It just simply wouldn't work. Even if they did make a rubric like that, applying it would be such a pain in the ass that no one would do it anyway. I know I've used this image way too many times, but please look at the little Timmy bracket guide. Just think of your average Commander deck. Use this. This is your guide. This is your guide right here. Just how would you feel playing your own deck while you're playing a precon? Make it personal like that. Maybe that'll feel better. Play a precon and give somebody else your deck. See how it feels. There's no point in us trying to shame people from wanting to play powerful decks. That's not the goal. We're just trying to get as even as possible and, you know, have a good time together. We want to play the board game version of Magic, not the incredibly competitive, overly sweaty version of Magic. Like, trust me, if I want to feel how great I am at building a deck, I'll go play Standard, and that rotation will satisfy the itch of showing how great I am. But Commander, I personally believe, is and should always be a more casual environment because of how many absurd variations there are. Okay, I'm gonna hop off of this high horse now after I've preached at you for like 14 minutes and just say, do you think that I'm right at all, or do you think that I'm completely off my rocker? Please let me know in the comments below. As always, this has been Sand for Days. I'm Course, and I get everywhere. Bye bye now.